Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka the Master of Unlocking and Explaining. Resident Evil Village has a lot to unpack from its ending, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down everything you need to know about this story in all its glory. The game changes a lot of the established lore, sets up what's to come, and packs some big twists that also impact a lot of the previous games. Full spoilers ahead, so if you haven't had a chance to play the game yet, then you best get out of here before I make you into a Jill sandwich. Please click the thumbs up button if you don't want to become my nemesis, and make sure you subscribe for breakdowns worth coming back to life for. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into our Resident Evil 8 ending explained. Okay, so up top I'm going to be going through the general plot points of the game, but if you want to skip ahead then timecodes will be linked below. The game itself is set 3 years after the events of Resident Evil 7, and much like that game, we see things through the perspective of everyone's favourite blank slate, Ethan Winters. Ethan is a bit of a weird one for me, as I never found the guy all that interesting in the previous game. He's very much an everyman, but what Resident Evil 8 does is that it injects some new life into him. There's a big twist about his past, and I have to say that when I learned it, I did find him slightly more interesting. Now it turns out that Ethan actually died right at the beginning of Resident Evil 7 after his first encounter with Jack Baker. However, the mold on the estate, which transformed them, too did the same thing with Ethan, and since then he's pretty much been a bioweapon capable of surviving almost every kind of injury. It's a nice little twist that explains why he's able to have his hands cut off more times than Anakin Skywalker, and makes the character far more interesting than he initially was. The game itself opens with Ethan living with Mia and their daughter Rosemary. Out of nowhere, a newly designed Chris Redfield appears, wearing a turtleneck and trench coat. Not only does he commit several fashion crimes, he also murders Mia and takes Ethan and Rosemary to a village located in Transylvania. It's not the best trip I've ever been on, I must admit, and I would have given it 1 star on TripAdvisor if it wasn't for the new character Lady Double D, a 9-foot tall vampire. Now I'll get into her in just a bit, but Chris of course appeared at the end of Resident Evil 7 with the BSAA, and he helped to rescue Ethan. In the 3 years since 7, Chris was actually paramount in aiding Mia and Ethan in hiding away from the nefarious forces that were behind the events of that game, so this twist comes completely out of the blue. The game clearly paints him out as a bad guy early on, but as we get into it we discover that it's not all that black and white. Chris actually has a big mission in the village, which of course becomes the key location that the game is set in. The area itself is overseen by several mutants who control their own parts of the village, and this area becomes the hub in which Ethan must battle through their forces, all whilst attempting to find pieces of his daughter who has been separated and placed into tiny flasks. How this is possible is because she has inherited the mold abilities present in her parents, and thus can withstand being broken up into little parts. It all gets a bit weird. Now Lady Dimitrescu, who I'm going to be calling Lady D from now on because I don't want to butcher her name, is absolutely everywhere in the marketing, but when it comes to the game itself, she doesn't appear that much. I was kinda hoping she would be something in the same vein of Mr. X or Nemesis, where the character would stalk and hunt you throughout the game, but the vampiric vixen is in for a very short time. There's also Carl Heisenberg, who leads the werewolves that roam the area, Moreau, who is an amphibious creature, and Donna, who can control a creepy puppet called Angie. At the head of these houses is Mother Miranda, a mysterious figure who is worshipped by the locals as a deity. Ethan encounters these early on after the transport to Transylvania is destroyed, and he ends up venturing into the village to see the horrors firsthand. Ethan works through the world killing all the heads of the houses, and he discovers that Heisenberg is planning a rebellion against Miranda so that he can take over and turn it into one big B&B. Heisenberg wants to use Rosemary to win, but Ethan of course refuses to hand his daughter over, and the pair fight. Now through this story we learn that Chris isn't actually a bad guy, and when Ethan confronts him we discover what the beginning of the game was actually about. It turns out that he didn't kill Mia, and the person he seemingly murdered was actually Miranda, just posing as her. Miranda faked her own death and managed to escape from the home, and it was her who crashed the transport with Ethan in so that she could take Rosemary. It turns out that Rosemary can be used as somewhat of a vessel, and Miranda wants to bring back a certain character through her. Chris and Ethan end up working together and they defeat Heisenberg, but Miranda arrives and kills Ethan by ripping his heart out. With everything left on Chris's shoulders, he launches an attack with his special forces. The BSAA also arrive, which is very important to bear in mind for the end of the game. They go off to fight Miranda on their own, separate from Chris, and there's also a lot more going on with them than meets the eye. In the cavernous areas of the village, Chris finds the source of the mold that he learns created Evelyn. Chris plants a bomb on it and travels deeper into the cave, which is where he discovers the truth about Miranda and the monsters in the village. Turns out that Miranda and her daughter Eva actually lived at the beginning of the 20th century, and when the world was ravaged by Spanish flu, the latter sadly died. Miranda experimented on the mold, and through doing so found a way to become immortal. Miranda gained all kinds of abilities through this, including the power to shapeshift and change certain parts of her body. These mutations have of course been present throughout several of the monsters in the series so far, showing that, as you guessed, it's all connected. Now, she wished to bring Eva back to life and experimented on several of the villagers, which resulted in the werewolves, or other lycans, the four houses, and of course Evelyn. Evelyn was viewed as a failure due to not really being Eva, and thus the work continued. Miranda was unable to find the perfect host until Rosemary came along, who of course inherited special abilities from her mother and father. They do a big retcon where it turns out that Miranda was actually linked in with Umbrella and that she mentored its founder, Oswald E. Spencer. The corporation of course created the bioweapons and zombies that have been staples throughout the series, and whether you like it or not, this is now the canon of Resident Evelyn. Now, Spencer branched off to do his own thing, and he ventured to Africa to work on creating the T-Virus. The Umbrella logo, however, is dotted throughout the village, and this is because Spencer stole the icon and just added some colour to it. Get their trademark lawyers in. Now, it's here that Chris also discovers Mia, and he learns that Ethan is alive. Ethan ends up fighting against Miranda, and he manages to save Rosemary. However, because he's taken a bigger battering than this video's dislike button because of all the crap puns, he's unable to recover and the character starts to die. For real this time. He says goodbye to his daughter and tells Chris to take care of her and get the hell out of there. Ethan detonates the bomb planted on the core, which destroys the entire area and of course himself. Chris, Mia and Rosemary make it out, but there are a lot of questions still up in the air. Now, in the game, Chris learns that the BSAA were actually bioweapons themselves, and he travels with his squad to the headquarters of the organization in order to get to the bottom of it. Now, I do think that the next game will come with the reveal that it is now company policy that the BSAA use bioweapons. These seem similar to the Tyrant and are likely people that have been experimented on. Whereas the bioweapons were once mindless monsters that could not be controlled, over the series we have seen how things have evolved through Ethan. He showed that it is possible to have extraordinary abilities and still be okay. Now, I know that they did it with Wesker and his son Jake too, and this cemented that you could remain relatively human. Jake started to help the fight against bioweapons, and couple this with Ethan, and you can see why the BSAA might have come round on them. This speaks into what happens in the post-credit scene of the game, which is where we join Rosemary, who's visiting Ethan's grave. Several years have passed at this point, and due to the way she looks, I'd say it's been 15 years at the very least. However, it is possible that because of the mold she has aged slightly differently, but let me know below if you think that or not. Either way, some time has passed, and we discover that she is actually working for the BSAA, which hammers home the latter point. She says that she's been busy with tests, and though this initially seems like it's to do with school, a horn honks on a nearby SUV, and she says, "Speak of the devil." This means the tests are linked with the BSAA, who have arrived to pick her up. Chris is nowhere to be seen here, and the agent who is gives a snarky remark and calls her Evelyn. I think this very much hints that the BSAA don't really respect the bio-organic population and very much view them as simply weapons, which could hint to them becoming somewhat villainous the next time around. There's even some dialogue over the radio between the agents in which we learn that there's a sniper standing by ready to shoot Rosemary in case things escalate. To me, it's clear that Rosemary wants to live a normal life and do things apart from her past. She has been likely mentored by Chris, and has learned a lot of things that he doesn't even know she is capable of. However, Chris has enlisted her on this mission to fight bioweapons, and this has meant she's been forced into a life of servitude. She looks completely miserable in this finale. I think that in the next game we will see her breaking free of this organization in order to do her own thing. They could potentially hunt her, or perhaps even use her for a mission, and then maybe attempt to exterminate her once it's complete. Rosemary clearly has a target on her back, and it's even possible that she has some connection to her father. In the game, we learn that the mold acts as somewhat of a backup for people and their personalities. This is how Miranda would have been able to bring her daughter back, even though she was dead. Thus, it is possible that Ethan could return in some form or be present in his daughter's memory. The agent says that she's a lot like her father, and she replies, "I know," even though she wouldn't have been old enough to remember him. Now this could simply be because they both possess powers, but she does flip out at being called Evelyn, and at the end of Resident Evil 7, we did discover that Jack was able to communicate with Ethan through the mold, making me think that Rosemary may have some connection with them that we don't know about. Evelyn was also able to do this, cementing that you can speak to the memories and manifestations of people that exist within the substance. Rosemary visited Ethan's grave and spoke to him like he was there, and though this is typical in mourning, it could be hinting at her ability to communicate with the character. Potentially a lot of reaching going on here, but either way it seems that the next game will likely centre around Rosemary and Chris. Because Ethan was gone, he likely became her father figure, and potentially we will see her breaking free of his control. I know he's a good guy, but it looks like they're overstepping the mark if they're sending snipers after Rosemary in case she steps out of line. Either way, a lot of things up in the air, and I know I've said that already, but the game ends with the car driving down the road. However, if you look very closely, you can see a mysterious figure going to meet it, and the car stops in order to pick this person up. Now this could be Chris, or even the sniper. Hell, it might even be Jake, but this seems like such a weird way to end the game that I think it has some importance. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on who you think this is and the game itself, so make sure you comment below and let me know. As a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize drawn the 30th of May, in which we're giving away 3 copies of the Godzilla vs. Kong collection. All you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on Resident Evil Village. The winners of last month's competition are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Jupiter's Legacy, which will be linked on screen right now. We've gone over the entire series and talked about the comic book changes, so definitely check it out if you want to know more. Out of the way, thank you for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.